Welcome to the Dalitalks show. My name is Dali. If you have not ever seen this show before, welcome and thank you for joining me. So today I have a special guest and I'm really excited because when I met her, I was super stoked, like total like girl fan. And I was just in awe that I was so lucky to meet such an incredible woman. Now, as a little kid, I had many aspirations of becoming all kinds of things, but it's so life changing, I could say, when you actually meet somebody who did something that you have never seen before, right? So this person is Olga Custodio. She is a retired captain from American Airlines, and she has flown over 11,000 hours. And she has flown a Boeing 727, a Fokker 100, a Boeing 757, and a Boeing 767 to the Caribbean, Central America, South America, Europe, Mexico, Canada, and all over the United States. So I know that you probably don't know what these airplanes are, but just to give you an idea, they're enormous. They're very big aircraft. She also, this is the most exciting part for me, she is also a retired lieutenant colonel from the United States Air Force, the Air Force Reserves, and she has 24 years of service, and she received her commission through the Officer Training School in 1980. And I invited her to come onto the show to share her story because I know that now we are focusing a lot on girls, looking into aviation and STEM. And I really feel like it's important for little kids, boys and girls, to know that, this person exists, that she is very, very involved in promoting aviation and STEM into kids, especially our Latinos, our our underserved children. And with all further ado, here is Olga Custodio. Hi.
Hi, Lali. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Now I'm, since I met you, I've been like such a fan. I was like starstruck. So could you share with your audience a little bit about you? How did you grow up and how you came about to, become a pilot in both, the commercial airlines and in the US Air Force?
Well, I grew up as an Army brat, lived all over the world. Luckily, my father was able to take us as a family wherever he was stationed. And I did a few states while he was going through school, communication school, and then we moved to Taiwan. It's Formosa, non-communist China. And I started first kindergarten and first grade there. From there, we moved back to New Jersey for a year or so, and then we lived in Tehran, Iran, and when the Shah was there. And then I did that through sixth grade, and then we moved to South America, to Paraguay. So I finished 10th grade in Paraguay. Went to DOD schools my whole life, being outside of the US, great schools. And then we moved back to Puerto Rico, where I was born. My parents are from Puerto Rico, and I did my 11th grade there, and I was able to graduate at 16 years old because I had enough credits, having gone to DOD schools, to graduate from high school at such a young age. But at 16, the only option I had was to continue to go to school. So I went to college, went to the University of Puerto Rico, and I had a plan. My major was going to be math. I was going to be a math major, and I already was accepted into the school to get a math degree. And my other plan also was to go to the ROTC because I wanted to follow my father's footsteps and serve in the military. So follow his love of country, self-service for just serving his country and knowing that you were part of something bigger than yourself. So I went to the ROTC building knowing that there was that program, the Reserves Officer Training Corps, and tried to apply. But unbeknownst to me, women were not allowed in ROTC at the time, and so I was rejected. Having gone through that experience, I had never experienced something like that before, so I had to look up my plan B to see exactly what I was going to do. So I had to think of another major. So I went to business school and got a degree in office management, and then I got a minor in math, thinking, well, I'm going to need something to do once I graduate from college. So I did that. In my last year of school, I met my husband. We got married. Everything was great. And he decided about 2 years into our marriage that we should consider joining the Air Force. So I found another opportunity. I said, well, now with my degree, I know I can qualify as an officer with a degree. And I tried to go in there. We went to a recruiter this time, and the recruiter did not offer me an officer slot. He said I could enlist and then try and do that later. And I knew I was qualified. We had gotten the highest scores on the AFOQT test. So I decided that I wasn't going to take something less, knowing that I was qualified for something more.
Wow.
And I figured, well, the best way to serve my country is as a Air Force spouse. And we went on. And finally, he got an assignment to the Canal Zone in Panama with the Air Force. And one summer, they had an open house, and there was a little booth for the Air Force, and they were talking about that the Air Force was recruiting females for pilot training. And it was the first time that they had opened that career field in the Air Force for women.
Wow. So what year was that?
That was in 1979 when I went to the to that open house. But the Navy had already opened their flight training for women 2 years prior to 79, and then the Air Force followed suit. So I went ahead and applied, and then in January of 1980, I was already going to the officer training school, and then from there I went on to the undergraduate pilot training school for the Air Force. And given that I was what, three and a half? No, my goodness. I've been married for like 4.5 years already, and we had a 3.5-year-old daughter. So, I mean, we had to juggle all of that to make sure that she was taken care of, and my husband was able to get orders and join me at Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas for pilot training.
Wow. So then, okay. So at what point did you know that you wanted to be a pilot? Is that something that your father did? Is that how that idea came?
No, he wasn't a pilot. He was in communications. He was more with the air attaché. He would take care and train foreign troops. So that's why we were traveling around the world. But when my husband was in, his career field was in airfield operations, which we were very familiar with, because when I graduated from college, well, actually my last year of college, I had a full-time job and finished school at night. And I worked for a commuter airline. That's where we met. So we were very familiar with the airline industry and, airplanes and that sort of thing. But when he went to the Air Force, he went to airfield management. And in airfield management, we had a lot of friends who were Air Force pilots and navigators. And so we were around them, and being around someone and you see them and they're regular people, because when you see someone that's, wow, you're in awe of people who actually fly airplanes. And I was like, wow, that would be awesome, So that's when I really thought about it, because at a commuter airline, I figure, well, I could go fly for the airlines as a flight attendant or something. I was actually working at the accounting department in the commuter airline. But you think about that, what do women do? Oh, they're flight attendants. They
Yeah.
back then they were stewardess,
Mhm.
but that's the only thought of flying that I was exposed to, that I could think of that I could do. But being around all these pilots and navigators in the Air Force gave me a good sense of, hey, they're down to earth. We talked with them and we had great conversations, and I knew, some of them were really good friends. And so you start to look at that very differently when you actually talk to someone who is in that field. They're
Right.
not something that is unreachable or unattainable or something that you read about. It's one-on-one, and you're like, wow, this is pretty neat. So
Yeah.
that's when I really started thinking about that possibility, and the fact that I still wanted to join the Air Force. So it was like the best job in the Air Force is to be a pilot. And I'm like, that would be just awesome. But that was just the thought, never dreaming that it would ever become available to me.
Wow, that's amazing. So your people who you were surrounding yourself with, were they pilots of fighter jets, or was it a different type of variety of aircraft?
Well, the aircraft that was at Little Rock Air Force Base was a C-130. So they were cargo planes, big airplanes. So they had a full crew. They had the commander, the first officer, a flight engineer, a crew chief, and all kinds of maintenance people that worked in that aircraft. So it was a crew concept aircraft.
Mhm.
But still, I thought it was pretty neat. And I thought about, well, if I ever got the opportunity when I finally was accepted to pilot training, I figured, well, I'll be able to fly one of those, because women at the time were not allowed in combat in fighter aircraft. So
Right. Yeah. Wow. So then you get accepted, and you were accepted to one of the first classes, right? For
yes,
women.
yes.
Yeah.
hmm
So how
At
many?
Laughlin Air Force Base, yes. Um, Actually, there were two females in my class, myself and another female. But within, I want to say, the first 3.5 weeks, she dropped out. She
Oh, wow.
she did not make it through the first part of the program.
Hmm.
So it was quite a challenge. But I think the fact that I had the stability of a family and my husband was there to support, even though we had a 4-year-old by that time, it was okay. It just kind of helped me ground myself and focus on the challenge ahead.
Wow, that's amazing. I can only imagine, because I went to school. I went to undergrad and straight into grad school when my babies were really small. So I don't know. It just sounds like Air Force, because I know how military schools are. That's a lot more intense, especially to learn how to fly an aircraft. So then you become the first Latina, right, in the Air Force.
Right,
For
right. So I was the first Latina through pilot training in the Air Force, but I didn't find out until maybe a year and a half later, or more than that, actually 2 years later, because one of my students, she was a female Latina, um, had gone through the Air Force Academy and she was going through pilot training. So I was working with her as a flight instructor, um, and she told me, "Oh, I'm going to be the first Latina Air Force pilot." And it struck me funny. I was like, "What are you talking about? I think you're looking at her. I'm already here." So, and it caught her by surprise too. So it was something I didn't think about. Being first was not my priority, was not my motivation. It was more to serve my country, join the Air Force, and then have the opportunity to be a pilot.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
That
That's
was amazing.
Yeah, that's one thing that I love sharing with kids. I tell them about people that I've learned throughout the years who were the first to do something. And I tell them, these people weren't trying to be the first. They just wanted to go for their goals, whatever their dream,
Right.
was, to whatever it is they wanted to do. So I really, really love that. And I find it so fascinating to actually be able to show kids, like this person did this. And, when you doubt yourself, some kids say, oh, well, I don't know. I want to be the first, I don't know, um, say robotics champion something, I don't know, let's invent something. But and they're like, but I don't think I could be, maybe not, it's so out of reach. I'm
Right.
pretty sure so many people have thought the same thing. It's so out of reach, but then it happens. I mean, you're an example of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
so amazing. So then so can you explain how you became a commercial airline pilot as well? Was that around the same time?
Sure. No, no, my plan was to, I had waited from the time I started college at 16 to the time I actually entered the Air Force was 10 years later.
Okay.
So it took me 10 years to finally get into the Air Force, which was my initial goal, was to become an Air Force officer. But sometimes when you're not offered that opportunity, it's just a delay, or it may not be the right time, or you're not ready for it. Timing's everything. So I speak to young students and I say, just because they say no, don't think it's the end of the world.
Mhm.
You just have to say, okay, what is next, and find whatever that next thing is. And if you come back to that original plan, that you still have that desire to achieve something that is your dream, keep your eyes and ears open. And when the opportunity presents itself, you will know and you will go ahead and grab it. Just because they shut the door, I always say go find a window, because there's some way to get in.
Yeah.
But keep that open mind.
Hmm. So then how was it, the training with the airline? Did you have to do a whole different type of training and go through a school
Right.
with them?
So once I did my 8 years, it was a transition time, because now my husband was saying, well, if we're both going to stay in, because we were both in the Air Force at the same time, and it was like, well, are we going to be able to be stationed together? Um, we didn't know what the possibilities of that was, and so he decided to get out. We moved to San Antonio, which I came to the Randolph Air Force Base, and the T-38 squadron. And flying a T-38, I just want to backtrack just a little bit. You need your fighter qualification. So I was a qualified uh, fighter jet, a
Yeah.
qualified pilot, without having the law that said that I could go fly a fighter.
Right.
So having an ejection seat, flying supersonic, formation, all of that is what a qualified fighter pilot is required to have when they graduate. And then they would go on to do that. So flying small jets, supersonic, was amazing. Now the transition came of how are we going to do this? And I didn't want to move the family, but I still wanted to serve my country. So I went into the reserves, and then I applied for the airlines. And in the airlines, now it's a crew concept. Now you have your captain, your first officer, and I was flying 727s. I started as a flight engineer. So I had to go get my flight engineer certificate and studied up for that, got that, and was able to apply. But it was an easy transition. When there's a crew, you got 3 people in there coordinating, working together to fly the aircraft, and it was pretty neat to have passengers on board, and I'd get a lot of questions like, what is she doing in there? where
Yeah,
people weren't aware that there were female pilots. And luckily, the flight attendants were very supportive, and they'd let the passengers know that I was a qualified pilot. And
mhm.
like all the pilots at American Airlines, yes, we went through the same training, the same system, and we were selected to be where we were.
Wow. So did you ever have any resistance being a woman and a pilot from either passengers or other colleagues?
Um, when I first started, the captains at the time were just about to retire, so their mindset was very resistant to the fact that women were going to be allowed in on the flight deck, to fly airplanes. And so they did their best to not welcome me,
Mm,
but it didn't interfere. I didn't let that interfere with my work. I knew that being a part of the crew in the cockpit came first. What they felt or what they saw or what they said, unless it was something to do with the crew concept and getting this airplane safely from point A to point B, everything else was irrelevant.
mm,
So I considered it their personal problem, not mine, because I was here and
yeah.
I was qualified and I knew that I was a good pilot, so I didn't have a problem with that. It's not fun to go through stuff like that, but you got to pick and choose your battles. But it
Absolutely.
was fine. When I became a captain, finally became a captain at American, I would greet the passengers and welcome them aboard. And one of the passengers asked me, "Oh, are you the captain?" I said, "Yes." "Is there a problem?" She goes, "Well," I said, "Ma'am, you do not have to take this flight. In another hour or so, there's another flight to the same destination. You can get off if you don't feel comfortable." And I don't know if I embarrassed her or she just felt bad because she didn't accept the fact that I was a female captain. She just, "Oh, no, no problem." She kept walking down the aisle and took her seat and like, okay. So, life goes on and things change, and you just have to teach people that culture changes, mindsets change, and things evolve. So yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, you touched such a good point there because I recently read an article that came out about a week or two ago about the likelihood of people accepting women in leadership roles. Um, to be precise, to be heads of state, so presidents,
Right.
and the top in developed countries ranked really low on both men and women. I think the highest was the UK, I believe. Second was Canada, and third, the US. And the US was in the about 67 percentile,
Of
like
what?
men and women accepting a woman as a president. And between men and women, the women were a little bit higher in acceptance rate than men, which made me very sad because it just comes to show that even women have been almost like, uh, what's the correct word, like brought up to believe that women should not be leaders, and that makes me so sad. And as a matter of fact, I took this article and that was one of those dinner time talks
Right.
with my girls, and I'm like, girls, this is an example that I'm telling you, like you have to believe in yourselves, because when you have the majority of the nation, it was like about 67% of women or so, that thought that, yeah, maybe a woman can be heads of state. Is like that just is a reflection of how women don't believe in themselves sometimes,
Right.
that they
Right.
too can be leaders. And I
Right.
told them, you have to not fall into that trap, because if if we were to have the same type of training for men and women available at all, for everything, we would be able to see a lot more women in leadership
Mhm.
roles, and it not be so weird or, like shocking to see a woman. And I told them, like the fact that, because I talked about you all the time whenever there's a perfect opportunity to talk about somebody who is just not, people don't know about, that
The
should.
traditional role, yes,
Yeah, I would tell
absolutely.
them, like that is an example. Like you have to try to remember that those people do live in this world and are making a difference. And it's just amazing. So I just love that, you know, you're out there, what you're doing now, you're talking to kids, and you're trying to instill that love for aviation. And can you tell me a little bit about how you're doing that?
Right. Well, right now I belong to a few nonprofits, and they're all having to do with military, aviation, aerospace, and I take every opportunity to go out and try to talk to young students and equally young girls, young boys, about aviation, and I share my experience. But I also talk about it doesn't have to be aviation. I try and instill with them that if they're born to do something, they'll know it because they'll find that passion and they have to pursue it because to get up every morning and say, oh my gosh, I have to go to work and it's a struggle. But when you're passionate about something, it's easy to jump out of bed and go because it's something that comes within and you're just expressing yourself of what you're born to do. You find your purpose and you go for it. So absolutely. And I speak to kids of all ages,
Mhm.
Girl Scouts, aviation explorers. I go to junior colleges, middle school, universities, and last year, I did a commercial, and it just elevated my presence, and it got me out there that people now know a little bit about my story, and I'm able to travel across the U.S. and share it and share what it takes to commit and continue to follow a dream. It's not easy. I've had questions of, did you ever want to quit? And the answer was, it's hard, you know. And sometimes the first person to challenge or set up a barrier is yourself because you have that self-doubt and you need to get over that. You need to get over it. He says, you do everything you can to succeed. And if you've waited as long as I had to wait 10 years to start to follow my dream, there's no way I was going to give up. It was like, give it all I have. And if it's not meant to be, then it was not meant to be. But you find a way and you make it happen. So.
Yeah, definitely. Can you explain a little bit for those who are watching and don't know what I think you said aviator cadet? Is that
Oh, Aviation Explorers.
explorers?
It's right. It's a part of the Girl and Boy Scouts of America that concentrate on aviation. So they have a separate group. I think it's for kids in high school that can do it. I think up to 21 is the age that they can be part of this, and they're exposed to people within aviation. They do field trips, they get flights, they do a lot of things. But for any kid who's interested and would like a first flight, I recommend they go to the EAA. It's the Experimental Aircraft Association. Um, if you sign up, it's between the ages of 8 and 17 years old. You get a 6-month free membership, and the local FBO offers a first free flight, and they do it once a month. If there's a chapter near where that student is, they'll be able to find the nearest chapter that offers that opportunity, which I think is great because people who don't have planes, have never been in a plane, to get that opportunity, they'll know, hey, is this for me or not?
Right.
Just an experience.
Yeah, I love that. So is there anything that you would like people to know about that's coming up within aviation or any of the programs that you're involved with?
Um, we have the Women in Aviation International. They have chapters all over the U.S. and around the world, but usually end of September, early October, they have a Girls in Aviation Day. And now this is strictly for girls, 8 to 17, and they have programs set up for that day. It's a whole day of camp, half days to whole days, and you're exposed to different things in aviation. What we do here in San Antonio, we're lucky that the aviation department of the San Antonio government here sponsors us and allows us to use their facilities at Stinson Municipal Airport. We have people that come in, universities, flying schools, and even the military come in and expose the girls to different things. So we give them navigation classes. We talk about aerodynamics. We take them to the tower. The EAA comes in and partners with us to give them their first flight. We put them in flight simulators. And the Air Force actually came this year and last year, and they brought in their VR goggles. So they are kind of exposing them to the new type of next generation training that the Air Force is looking into to accelerate their pilot training. And then the universities have the airframe and mechanics. They come in, they've riveted, they've worked with tools, they sewn cloth wings. I mean, it's just a little bit of everything.
That sounds really awesome, and like an amazing opportunity for those kids who normally would not be exposed to anything like this.
Exactly, exactly. Yes. And the camp, our camp fills up really fast, really fast. So, we get about 100 girls, and it's a challenge sometimes to get them from one place to the other, but we have great volunteers that come and help us out and make the day go smoothly.
That's amazing. So is this program free, or is there a fee?
Well, sometimes we get grants to cover some of the girls that for these underserved schools that we partner with. And then it's only $25, so for the day, and we give them breakfast and we give them lunch. So I think that's a very small fee.
Oh, yeah.
The other reason, it'll cover a few things, but sometimes when you pay for something, you show up. If it's free, you can say, well, I didn't pay anything, so I don't feel like going.
Yeah.
So it kind of commits the camper to show up.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's really amazing. I know a lot of people have no idea about any of these programs. I didn't know any of it until I spoke to you that first time. You and Graciela, who was also a pilot, and my daughter actually got to go to a program, and she graduates here in a few weeks. And it's just amazing because I get to see what they do, and the whole simulator thing, and it's just really incredible. And it was just right here in our backyard pretty much, and a lot
Right.
of people don't know of what is
Right.
being offered. And then we also have March Air Force Base really close by too. So I mean, the opportunities are there. It's just that a lot of us, the public, usually is not aware. So I hope that
Right.
people get to watch this video and start thinking about how they can expose their children to aviation.
Aviation is not just being a pilot. There's so many things in aviation. I mean, you can design airplanes, you can do interior decoration for these nice small jets that people own. You can be a mechanic, you can be an air traffic controller, you can be a flight nurse, even in medicine, or aerospace and aviation lawyers. So there's so many fields that you can specialize in and still be involved in aviation if you really are fascinated with aviation, and now that NASA's gearing up to put people on the moon again and go to Mars, and that's amazing. I just love all that stuff. So
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well,
yeah,
thank you. I really appreciate taking the time to share your story with us and to let
thank you.
our viewers know, that these opportunities are available to them. I will be linking the links that you provided me with in
Okay.
the comments so that people can go to them and check them out. And everyone, if you have any questions for Olga, please email them in to Dali@dalitalks.com, and I will forward them to her, and we'll see what you all ask. I love when people ask questions because sometimes there are those odd questions that you don't think about, and
Right.
so yeah, maybe we'll have you back again in the future. So
Absolutely.
thank
Absolutely.
you, and thank you
Sure.
so much for having served our country and for having been, this amazing, and for being this amazing person that goes out and inspires our youth and educates the public about what possibilities there are out there.
There are a lot, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate you and what you're doing. So thank you. Anytime, I'm here.
Thank you. One last question. If
Yes,
people want to follow you on social media, are you on social media?
sort of. Yes, I hardly post anything. I'm working on getting that out there. My husband does a lot of postings for me, but once we get it set up, I'll definitely let you know. I'm working on my website, so once we get everything set up, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much once again. And everyone, I hope that you really like this interview. And if you have any questions, please send them in. And also, any comments would be greatly appreciated because I like knowing what you like and did not like about the interviews and what your favorite takeaway from this interview was. So until next time, thank you and have a wonderful day.
Bye.